Welcome to my channel, a vlog that brings your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
The kitchen's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow over the stainless steel countertops where I hunched over a half-eaten plate of seafood risotto. It was almost midnight. My fingers trembled slightly as I shoveled cold rice into my mouth, wincing at the fishy taste that had intensified after hours under the heat lamps. "Just 5 more minutes," I whispered to myself, ears straining for the sound of the restaurant's back door. Chef Marco always left by 11:45, but sometimes he lingered, counting the day's profits or finishing a cigarette in the alley. Getting caught would mean losing the only steady job I'd managed to hold since Emma was born. Emma. My chest tightened at the thought of my 4-year-old daughter sleeping at Mrs. Patel's apartment 3 blocks away. I'd be lucky to make it there by 12:30, exhausted, but at least with a full stomach. The $7. 25 hourly wage at Bella Luna barely covered our cramped 1-bedroom apartment, let alone groceries and the medications Emma needed. I scraped the last grains of rice from the china plate, one of the expensive ones with gold trim that we only used for VIP guests. I should wash it immediately, leave no evidence. As I stood, my waitress uniform, a size too large, hung from my frame. 6 months of rationing food, giving the best portions to Emma, had hollowed out my once soft curves. The sound of voices from the dining room froze me mid-step. "I've already transferred the money, Antonio. What more do you want from me?" "Respect, Mr. Caruso. That's all I've ever asked for." My blood turned to ice. Antonio Vicario. Everyone in Little Italy knew that name, though few had seen the man himself. Owner of half the neighborhood's businesses, rumored head of the city's most powerful crime family. And he was here, now, after closing. I carefully set the plate in the industrial sink, moving with practiced silence. The kitchen's swinging door was propped slightly ajar, offering a sliver view into the dimly lit dining room. I should leave, grab my coat from the staff room, and slip out the back exit, but my feet seemed rooted to the floor as I stole a glimpse. 5 men occupied our best table, the one by the windows overlooking the harbor. 4 wore dark suits, faces grim and watchful, but it was the 5th who captured my gaze. Unlike the others, he wore no tie, just a crisp white shirt unbuttoned at the collar beneath a tailored gray suit that probably cost more than my yearly rent. Dark hair swept back from a face that seemed carved from stone. All sharp angles and shadows in the restaurant's intimate lighting. He sat with the casual confidence of a man who never questioned his own authority, one hand resting on the table, the other hidden beneath. "You think money fixes everything," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "But some things can't be bought, Mr. Caruso." The balding man across from him, Caruso apparently, wiped sweat from his brow with a napkin. "It was a misunderstanding. My son, he's young, impulsive. He disrespected my sister." The quiet way Antonio Vicario delivered these words made the hair on my arms stand up. In my family, that means something. I should not be hearing this. These were not words meant for outsiders. I backed away from the door, but my elbow knocked against a stack of metal prep bowls. The clatter echoed like gunshots in the silent kitchen. 5 heads turned toward the kitchen door. "Check it," Antonio commanded, and one of the suits stood immediately. Panic seized my chest. I spun around, frantically searching for an escape, but the back door was too far. I'd never make it before they caught me. In desperation, I ducked behind the massive refrigerator just as the kitchen door swung open. Heavy footsteps crossed the tile floor. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to make myself smaller, invisible. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain he could hear it. "Nothing here, boss," the man called out after a cursory glance around. "Probably a rat." A pause. "I don't like rats," Antonio's voice replied from the dining room. "Check again." The footsteps resumed, more methodical now. I closed my eyes, a silent prayer forming on my lips. Emma needed me. I couldn't disappear like so many others who'd crossed the Vicario family's path. The refrigerator door opened, casting a rectangle of light across the floor inches from my hiding spot. Then it closed. Cabinets opened and closed. Then silence. I dared to exhale softly, and felt a hand clamp over my mouth. "Found something after all," the man said, his grip painfully tight as he dragged me from my hiding place. "A little mouse." He marched me through the swinging door. one hand still covering my mouth, the other twisting my arm behind my back. The pain brought tears to my eyes as I stumbled into the dining room. The 4 men at the table turned to look at me, but I only saw Antonio Vicario. Up close, he was younger than I'd expected. Maybe mid-30s, with eyes so dark they appeared black in the low light. A thin scar traced his right jawline, disappearing beneath his collar. He studied me with a detached curiosity, like a scientist observing a specimen. "Let her go, Dominic," he said after a moment. "She's staff, not competition." The pressure on my arm and mouth released, and I staggered slightly, fighting the urge to run. My waitress uniform suddenly felt like a target on my back. I'm sorry," I stammered, my voice barely audible. "I was just cleaning up. I didn't hear anything." Antonio's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes. "You're not on tonight's schedule." The fact that he knew the restaurant staffing schedule sent a chill down my spine. Of course he would know. Rumors said he had ownership stakes in most of the Harbor District's businesses. I stayed late to help with a large party," I lied, avoiding his gaze. "I should go now." "What's your name?" he asked, ignoring my attempt to leave. "Lily," I whispered. "Lily Morgan." "Sit down, Lily Morgan." It wasn't a request. The man called Dominic pulled out a chair, and my legs folded automatically. I perched on the edge, hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide their trembling. Antonio nodded to another of his men, who placed a glass of red wine in front of me. The rich, fruity aroma wafted up, so different from the boxed wine I occasionally allowed myself as a treat. "Drink," Antonio said. I lifted the glass with unsteady fingers and took the smallest sip possible. The wine was complex and smooth, nothing like I'd ever tasted before. I set the glass down carefully, acutely aware of the gold wedding band on Antonio's left hand catching the light. Married? Of course. Men like him always were. "Tell me, Lily Morgan," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Why were you eating the restaurant's food in the kitchen after hours?" My stomach dropped. The half-eaten risotto, the expensive plate. I was caught. Not just eavesdropping on a Mafia conversation, but stealing from my employer. I could feel my job evaporating before my eyes. My voice cracked. The truth was too humiliating. But I couldn't think of a convincing lie under his intense scrutiny. I was hungry. Something changed in his expression, a subtle softening around the eyes. "Marco doesn't feed his staff? We get a meal before service," I said quickly, not wanting to get the chef in trouble. Sometimes it's not enough. Antonio turned to Caruso, who had been watching our exchange with nervous eyes. "Is this how you treat your employees, Mr. Caruso? They have to scavenge like strays after closing?" Caruso paled. "She's not supposed to be here. Staff clock out after cleaning." That wasn't my question. Antonio's voice remained soft, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I found my voice somehow, desperate to diffuse the tension. "Please, it's not Mr. Caruso's fault. I have a daughter." I stopped abruptly, wishing I could take back the words. The less these men knew about Emma, the better, but Antonio had already caught it. "A daughter," he repeated, eyes narrowing slightly. "And her father?" "Not in the picture," I said, the familiar lie sliding easily from my lips. Better than the truth, that Emma's father had stolen my savings and disappeared when I told him I was pregnant, leaving behind only crushing debt and a restraining order that did little to ease my constant fear of his return. Antonio studied me for a long moment, then abruptly turned back to Caruso. "Our business is concluded for tonight. I expect to hear better news next week." The dismissal was clear. Caruso and his associate stood quickly, relief evident in their hurried movements. They were almost to the door when Antonio spoke again. "Mr. Caruso." His tone made them freeze. "I'll be keeping an eye on how you treat your staff from now on, particularly Ms. Morgan." Caruso's face contorted between fear and confusion before he managed a jerky nod and practically fled the restaurant, his companion close behind. I remained frozen in my chair, uncertain of my fate. Antonio's attention returned to me, his gaze traveling over my too thin frame, the dark circles under my eyes, the chapped hands clasped in my lap. "How old is your daughter?" he asked unexpectedly. 4, I answered automatically. "And you live nearby?" Alarm bells rang in my head. I nodded vaguely. Unwilling to give this dangerous man my address, Antonio reached into his jacket, and I flinched involuntarily. He paused, those dark eyes registering my fear, before slowly withdrawing a sleek leather wallet. He extracted several $100 bills and placed them on the table. "For your daughter," he said simply. Pride and desperation warred within me. The money would cover Emma's medication for months, but accepting anything from a man like Antonio Vicario would be making a deal with the devil. "I can't," I whispered, though my eyes remained fixed on the bills. "You can and you will," he replied, his tone brooking no argument. "Consider it compensation for our interruption of your meal." As if choreographed, his 3 remaining men stood simultaneously. Antonio remained seated, those unfathomable eyes still on me. "Dominic will drive you home. That's not necessary," I began. "It's past midnight, and this neighborhood isn't safe for a woman alone." A bitter smile touched his lips. "Ironically, the most dangerous man in it is ensuring you get home safely." I didn't move, torn between fear and an inexplicable curiosity about this contradictory man. My hesitation seemed to amuse him. "The money won't disappear if you look away, Lily Morgan," he said softly. "Though I might." I reached for the bills with trembling fingers, careful not to touch his hand. "Thank you," I managed. He inclined his head slightly, then stood in one fluid motion. "Until we meet again." "Will we?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Antonio paused, and for an instant, something like genuine surprise crossed his face. Then the mask returned. "I make it a point to know everyone in my territory, Ms. Morgan, especially those with interesting stories." With that enigmatic statement, he turned and walked toward the exit, his men falling in around him like shadows. Only Dominic remained, watching me expectantly. As I gathered my coat and the money, more cash than I'd held in years, a strange certainty settled over me. This chance encounter, this moment of weakness when I'd been caught stealing leftover food, had somehow set something irreversible in motion. For better or worse, Antonio Vicario had noticed me, and people noticed by men like him rarely returned to their ordinary lives. The next morning arrived with harsh reality. Emma's fever had returned, her small body radiating heat as she curled against me in our shared bed. I pressed my lips to her forehead, wincing at the warmth. "Mommy has to work today, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing damp curls from her flushed face. "But Mrs. Patel will take care of you." Emma's eyes, so like her father's, fluttered open. "Don't feel good." "I know, baby." I reached for the medicine on our cluttered nightstand, silently blessing the crisp bills now hidden inside my battered copy of Jane Eyre. For once, I wouldn't have to choose between medication and groceries. "This will help." After coaxing the cherry-flavored liquid into her, I dressed quickly in the bathroom, avoiding my reflection. The events of last night seemed dreamlike in the harsh morning light. The risotto, the Mafia boss, the money that burned like a secret in my book. Dominic had driven me home in a gleaming black SUV with tinted windows, saying nothing beyond asking for my address. He'd waited until I was safely inside the building before pulling away, the luxury vehicle conspicuous on my rundown street. Mrs. Patel answered her door in a faded house dress, concern immediately creasing her kind face when she saw Emma in my arms. "The fever is back?" she asked, reaching for my daughter. I nodded, handing over Emma's backpack. "I gave her medicine 30 minutes ago. There's more in the side pocket." "Don't worry, Beta. I will call you if she gets worse," Mrs. Patel promised, using the Hindi term of endearment she'd bestowed on me months ago when I'd first begged for her help with childcare. A retired nurse, she charged less than any daycare, and genuinely loved Emma. "Thank you," I said, slipping 2 20s from my waitressing tips into her hand. "I'll be back as soon as my shift ends." I was halfway down the hallway when Mrs. Patel called after me. "Lily, a man came looking for you early this morning." I froze, turning slowly. "What man?" "Very proper gentleman. Suit and tie. Asked if Lily Morgan lived in this building." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "What did you tell him?" Mrs. Patel frowned. "Nothing, of course. I don't know your apartment number," I said. He left his card. She rummaged in her pocket and held out a cream-colored business card. With reluctant fingers, I took it. The card was thick, expensive stock with just a name and number embossed in dark ink. Antonio Vicario. Thank you, I said automatically, slipping the card into my pocket. If he comes back, I say nothing, Mrs. Patel assured me, dark eyes sharp with understanding. She'd lived in this neighborhood for 40 years. She knew the Vicario name as well as anyone. Be careful, Beta. I hurried to work, mind racing. How had he found my building so quickly? What did he want? The money had felt like a dismissal, a way to clear his conscience after catching me in such a humiliating position. I'd never expected to hear from him again. Bella Luna was quiet when I arrived, still 3 hours before opening. I slipped in through the staff entrance, changed into my uniform, and began setting tables with mechanical precision, muscle memory taking over while my thoughts churned. Lily? Chef Marco's voice snapped me back to the present. He stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed over his broad chest. My office. Now. My heart sank. This was it. He'd discovered my late-night theft, and I was about to be fired. I followed him silently to the cramped room that served as his office, bracing for the worst. Marco closed the door behind us and sank heavily into his chair. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. Do you know who was here last night? He asked without preamble. I hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. I saw some men after closing. Not just any men. Marco ran a hand through his thinning hair. Antonio Vicario himself, in my restaurant. Oh, I managed, studying the scuffed toes of my work shoes. And imagine my surprise, Marco continued, when Mr. Caruso calls me at 6 this morning to tell me that Vicario specifically mentioned you. My head jerked up. Me? Marco leaned forward, his expression unreadable. He said Vicario threatened him over how staff are treated, particularly you. What exactly happened last night, Lily? The truth was too shameful to admit. I'd been stealing food, eavesdropping on a Mafia conversation. Either offense alone could cost me this job. I stayed late, I began carefully. To clean up. They came in after hours for a private meeting. I accidentally interrupted. And nothing. I lied. I apologized and tried to leave. Marco studied me for a long moment. Vicario doesn't concern himself with restaurant waitstaff. He owns half the waterfront, for God's sake. Why would he care about you? The question hung in the air between us. I had no answer that made sense. Finally, Marco sighed. Well, whatever the reason, it seems you've acquired a powerful patron. He pronounced the word with distaste. Your schedule has been adjusted. Effective immediately, you'll work lunches only, Monday through Friday. I stared at him, confused. But that's fewer hours. I can't afford. Your hourly rate has been tripled, Marco interrupted flatly, and you'll receive full health benefits. Mr. Caruso's orders straight from Vicario. The room seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I don't understand. Marco's laugh was humorless. Join the club. Listen, Lily, I don't know what game Vicario is playing, but my advice, don't get pulled into his world. Men like him, they take everything eventually. I nodded numbly, too shocked to form a coherent response. Triple my salary? Health insurance? The changes would transform Emma's life, our lives. But the cost? I have to open the restaurant, Marco said, standing abruptly. Your new schedule starts today. You're done at 3 p.m. I drifted through my shift in a daze, mechanically taking orders and delivering plates while my mind spun with questions. By 2 o'clock, the lunch crowd had thinned to a few lingering business people. I was wiping down a table near the window when a sleek black car pulled up outside. My breath caught as Dominic emerged from the driver's side, scanning the street before opening the rear door. Antonio Vicario stepped out, immaculate in a charcoal suit, sunglasses shielding his eyes despite the overcast day. 2 more men flanked him as he crossed the sidewalk to Bella Luna's entrance. I retreated to the service station, pulse hammering as the small group was seated at the best table, the same one from last night. Antonio removed his sunglasses, folded them precisely, and looked directly at me, as if he'd known exactly where I stood. Marco emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands nervously on a towel. Mr. Vicario, An honor. I didn't know you were coming. Last-minute decision, Antonio replied smoothly, his gaze still on me. I'd like Ms. Morgan to be our server. Marco glanced between us, confusion evident on his face. Of course. Lily, table 7. On shaking legs, I approached their table. Up close, in daylight, Antonio was even more striking, his features too harsh to be conventionally handsome, yet compelling in their intensity. A thin platinum wedding band gleamed on his left hand. Good afternoon, Ms. Morgan, he said, voice pitched for my ears alone. I trust you slept well? Yes. Thank you, I managed, pulling out my order pad. Can I get you gentlemen something to drink? Antonio's lips curved slightly. So professional. The house red for my associates. Sparkling water for me. I nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Your daughter. Is she feeling better today? I froze. I hadn't mentioned Emma was sick. How did you... I make it my business to know things, Ms. Morgan. His tone remained pleasant, but the implication chilled me. He'd had me watched. The medication. Is it working? I glanced at the other men, but they seemed deliberately focused elsewhere, creating the illusion of privacy. Yes, I said quietly. Thank you for asking. Good. Antonio nodded, dismissing me. I retreated to the bar to place their drink order, mind racing. The bartender, Paolo, gave me a curious look as he prepared the drinks. Careful with that one, Lily, he murmured, nodding toward Antonio's table. That's not a man you want taking an interest in you. I didn't ask for his interest, I replied, arranging glasses on my tray. Paolo snorted. No one ever does. When I returned with their drinks, Antonio was engaged in quiet conversation with his men, heads bent close together. They fell silent as I approached. Are you ready to order? I asked, careful to address the table generally rather than Antonio specifically. Chef's choice, Antonio replied. He knows what I like. I nodded and headed for the kitchen, but once again his voice stopped me. Ms. Morgan, join me for a moment. It wasn't a request. I glanced around the nearly empty restaurant, then reluctantly slid into the chair he indicated with a nod. His men immediately stood and moved to a nearby table, leaving us alone. Your new schedule, Antonio said without preamble. It suits you? So it had been his doing. Why? I asked, forgetting my place. Why would you do that? Something like amusement flickered in his dark eyes. Perhaps I believe in fair compensation. You don't know me, I countered. You have no reason to help me. Don't I? Antonio leaned forward slightly. Tell me, what would have happened if I reported you for stealing food last night? I flinched at the blunt description. I would have been fired. And your daughter? What would happen to her? The question struck like a physical blow. I would find another job. In this economy? With no references? Antonio shook his head. You're one missed paycheck from disaster, Lily Morgan. A woman in your position. There are men who would take advantage. Men like you? I regretted the words instantly. Rather than anger, I saw something like approval in his expression. There are no men like me, he said softly. But yes, I could take advantage. Instead, I'm offering you a chance. A chance for what? Security, he replied simply. For you and your daughter. I studied his face, searching for the trap. What's the catch? Antonio smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed his severe features. Direct. I like that. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. Inside is an address. Come there tonight at 8. We'll discuss possibilities. I can't, I said automatically. My daughter... Childcare has been arranged, he interrupted. Mrs. Patel is available until midnight. Fear and anger flared in equal measure. You've been investigating me. Of course I have. He seemed puzzled by my indignation. I don't make offers blindly, Lily, and if I refuse? Antonio's expression hardened slightly. Then nothing changes. You keep your improved schedule. Your daughter continues to battle recurring infections from your mold-infested apartment. And I find someone else. The casual mention of Emma's health problems, something I hadn't told anyone at work, sent a chill down my spine. Just how closely had he been watching us? What exactly are you offering? I asked, voice barely audible. Come tonight and find out. Antonio placed the envelope on the table between us. Wear something nice. Oh, before I could respond, he stood, signaling the end of our conversation. His men immediately returned, falling into position around him. The food can be delivered to our table in 15 minutes, he instructed. You're done for the day, Ms. Morgan. I watched, speechless, as he returned to his table. Marco appeared at my elbow, nervously wiping his hands on his apron. Everything okay? He asked, eyes darting between me and Antonio. I nodded mechanically, picking up the envelope. I've been dismissed for the day, Marco frowned. By Vicario? What the hell is going on, Lily? I wish I knew, I replied honestly. I changed quickly in the staff room, mind whirling with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. As I left through the back exit, a black SUV idled in the alley. The passenger window lowered to reveal Dominic. Boss says to drive you home, he stated flatly. I hesitated, clutching my bag tighter. I can take the bus. Dominic's expression didn't change. It wasn't a suggestion. Reluctantly, I climbed into the back seat. The interior smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Antonio's scent, I realized with a jolt. I sat rigidly, staring out the window as we navigated through downtown traffic. Been with Mr. Vicario long? I asked when the silence became unbearable. Dominic's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. 10 years. And what exactly does he do? A ghost of a smile touched Dominic's stern mouth. He's a businessman. What kind of business? The profitable kind. I fell silent, recognizing the futility of my questioning. When we reached my apartment building, Dominic got out and opened my door before I could reach for the handle. 8 o'clock, he reminded me. I'll be here to pick you up at 7:30. Inside my cramped apartment, I sank onto the worn sofa, envelope clutched in my trembling hands. I should call the police. But what would I report? That a powerful man had given me money, improved my working conditions, and invited me to dinner. They would laugh me out of the station, if they weren't already on his payroll. I opened the envelope. Inside was a cream-colored card with an address embossed in elegant script, the Archer Hotel, penthouse suite. Beneath it, a handwritten note. Dresses provided. Whatever game Antonio Vicario was playing, I was about to become a piece on his board. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, beneath the fear lurked something far more dangerous. Curiosity, and the faintest flicker of anticipation. At precisely 7:30 p.m., I stood at my apartment window, watching the street below. Emma had gone to Mrs. Patel's without protest, still feverish but improving. When I'd tried to pay her, the older woman had smiled mysteriously and said, "Already taken care of, Beta." Another thread in the web Antonio was weaving around my life. The black SUV appeared exactly on time, gliding to a stop at the curb. I smoothed my hands over my best outfit, a simple black dress I'd worn to countless job interviews, and grabbed my worn leather purse. Whatever awaited me at the Archer Hotel, I would face it with dignity. Dominic held the car door without speaking, his face impassive as I slid into the back seat. The city streaked by outside the tinted windows, transforming from my rundown neighborhood to the gleaming downtown district where I normally only went to work. The Archer Hotel occupied an entire block, its Art Deco facade illuminated against the night sky. I'd passed it countless times but never imagined entering. "Mr. Vicario is already upstairs," Dominic informed me as we pulled into a private garage beneath the building. "I'll take you up." We bypassed the opulent lobby entirely, entering a private elevator that required a keycard. My stomach lurched as we ascended to the top floor. The doors opened directly into a foyer more spacious than my entire apartment, with soaring ceilings and marble floors. "This way," Dominic directed, leading me through an archway into a vast living area. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the harbor, the city lights reflecting on the dark water below. "Ms. Morgan has arrived," Dominic announced to the seemingly empty room, then disappeared through a side door, leaving me alone. "One moment," Antonio's voice called from another room. I stood awkwardly in the center of the space, afraid to touch anything. The furnishings were elegant but masculine, all dark woods and buttery leather, with abstract art adorning the walls. No personal touches, no photographs. It felt like a stage set rather than a home. Sorry to keep you waiting. I turned to find Antonio entering from a hallway, more casually dressed than I'd seen him before in dark slacks and a white shirt, unbuttoned at the collar. Without his suit jacket and tie, he appeared somehow more human, though no less intimidating. "Your home is beautiful," I said, unsure how else to begin. "It's just a hotel suite," he replied, moving to a sideboard where crystal decanters gleamed. "I keep it for business in the city." "Drink? No, thank you." He poured himself something amber over ice, studying me over the rim of his glass as he took a sip. "You didn't wear the dress." I blinked in confusion. "What dress?" Antonio frowned slightly. "There should have been a package delivered to you this afternoon. I've been with my daughter since leaving the restaurant," I explained. "Nothing was delivered." He set his glass down with a sharp click. "Inexcusable." He pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. After a moment, he looked up. "It will be here shortly. In the meantime, please sit." I perched on the edge of a leather sofa, hands folded tightly in my lap. Antonio took a seat opposite me, his posture relaxed, but his gaze intense. "You have questions," he stated. I almost laughed at the understatement. "A few, yes. Ask them." I hesitated, sorting through the chaos in my mind for the most pressing concern. "Why me? Why are you doing all this? For me?" Antonio leaned forward slightly. "Do you believe in fate, Lily?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know." "I do." His dark eyes held mine. "When meaningful coincidences occur, what Jung called synchronicity, I pay attention. Finding me eating stolen food was meaningful?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "More than you realize." A knock at the door interrupted whatever he might have said next. Antonio rose smoothly and returned moments later with a large white box bearing a designer logo I recognized from magazine advertisements. "Your dress," he said, extending the box toward me. "The bathroom is through there, if you'd like to change." I accepted the box warily. "I don't understand what this is about." "Humor me," he replied simply. In the marble bathroom larger than my bedroom, I opened the box with trembling fingers. Nestled in tissue paper lay a dress of deep emerald silk, alongside a matching pair of heels and a velvet jewelry box. I lifted the dress carefully, admiring the simplicity of its design. Sleek lines that would skim rather than cling, modest neckline, 3/4 sleeves. Expensive yet understated. Inside the jewelry box, a pair of pearl earrings gleamed against dark velvet. No necklace, no bracelet, nothing that could feel like a collar or chain. The thoughtfulness of this detail wasn't lost on me. I changed quickly, the silk cool and smooth against my skin. The dress fit perfectly, as though tailored specifically for my measurements. The woman who stared back from the mirror looked like a stranger, someone elegant, someone who belonged in places like the Archer Hotel penthouse. When I emerged, Antonio was standing by the windows, silhouetted against the city lights. He turned, and for an instant, something like genuine appreciation flickered across his face before his expression returned to its usual inscrutability. "Much better," he said. "Green suits you." "Thank you for the dress," I said, struggling to maintain my composure. "But I still don't understand what I'm doing here." "Have dinner with me," he replied, gesturing toward an adjoining room where a table had been set for two. "We'll talk." The dining room was intimate, lit by candles that cast a warm glow over fine china and crystal. A bottle of wine breathed in a silver bucket beside the table. The scene was unmistakably romantic. A thought that sent a cold jolt through me. "You're married," I blurted as he held a chair for me. Antonio's expression didn't change as he took his own seat. "Yes." "Then what is this?" I gestured at the table, the dress, the entire scenario. "Business," he replied smoothly, "though I appreciate your moral concern." A server appeared from a side door I hadn't noticed, delivering the first course with silent efficiency. After he withdrew, I tried again. What kind of business could possibly involve me? Antonio took a measured sip of wine. "I'm looking for someone trustworthy to manage a new venture. The hours would be flexible, ideal for a single mother. The compensation would be substantial." I set down my fork. "I'm a waitress." I dropped out of community college when I got pregnant. Whatever you're offering, I'm not qualified. You underestimate yourself, he countered. You're intelligent, observant, and discreet. You've survived alone in difficult circumstances. These qualities interest me more than formal education. What exactly would this job entail? I asked cautiously. Managing one of my legitimate businesses, Antonio replied. A children's boutique in Brightwater. I nearly choked on my water. Brightwater was the most exclusive suburb in the region, where houses started at 7 figures and luxury cars were as common as minivans elsewhere. A children's boutique, I repeated flatly. High-end clothing, toys, accessories, catering to a discerning clientele. Antonio studied my reaction. You would be the face of the business, hiring staff, overseeing inventory, maintaining client relationships. And the real purpose? I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. Antonio's eyebrows rose slightly. Perceptive. The boutique will occasionally receive special shipments, items that bypass traditional customs channels. Your job would be to accept these deliveries and secure them until my people retrieve them. Smuggling, I clarified, if you prefer crude terminology. I set down my glass carefully. You want me to break the law for you. I want to give you and your daughter a better life, he corrected. The starting salary is $150,000 annually, plus benefits and a housing allowance. The apartment above the boutique comes with the position. 3 bedrooms renovated last year. A good school district for Emma. The numbers made my head spin. More money than I'd ever imagined earning. A real home in a safe neighborhood. The best education for my daughter. Everything I'd ever wanted for Emma, packaged with a tidy criminal bow. Why not use someone already in your organization? I asked, trying to find the catch. Because you have something they don't, Antonio replied. You're invisible. No criminal record. No connections to my family or businesses. To all appearances, you'd be exactly what you seem, a single mother running a children's shop. And if I'm caught? Antonio's expression hardened slightly. You won't be. But if something were to go wrong, you would be protected. How? You would know nothing about what's in the packages, he explained patiently. Just that you're required to place them in a specific storage area. Plausible deniability. I studied his face, searching for deception. And if I refuse, then you walk out of here, return to your current life, and we never speak again. He leaned forward slightly. I don't force people, Lily. That's not how I conduct business. Just to be clear, I said carefully, you found me stealing leftover food and decided I'd be perfect to run a front for smuggling. What exactly? Nothing that harms children, Antonio replied immediately. I have strict principles about that. But not strict enough to avoid illegal activity altogether. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. We all make compromises to survive. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my purse. I glanced at it apologetically. It's Mrs. Patel. And Antonio nodded permission, and I answered quickly. Lily, I'm sorry to interrupt. Mrs. Patel's voice came through, tight with worry. Emma's fever has spiked again. She's asking for you. My chest constricted with familiar fear. I'll be right there. I've called a doctor friend, she continued. He thinks she needs to go to the emergency room. The ER? Panic rose in my throat. But the cost? We'll discuss that later. Please hurry. I hung up, already reaching for my purse. I have to go. My daughter... I heard, Antonio said, standing immediately. Dominic will drive you. Relief washed through me. Thank you. Which hospital? He asked, pulling out his phone. I don't know yet, I admitted. Whichever emergency room will take our insurance, or lack thereof. Antonio's expression tightened as he typed something on his phone. Go to St. Vincent's Children's Hospital. They're expecting you. I froze halfway to the door. St. Vincent's. That's the best pediatric hospital in the state. They won't, they will, he interrupted. Everything is arranged. Go now. Dominic is waiting. The drive to my apartment building was a blur of anxiety. Dominic broke numerous traffic laws, getting me there in record time. Mrs. Patel was waiting in the lobby, Emma bundled in blankets despite the warm evening. My daughter's face was flushed with fever, her eyes glassy. Mommy, she whimpered as I gathered her into my arms. I'm here, baby. I soothed, pressing my lips to her burning forehead. We're going to make you all better. I turned to thank Mrs. Patel, but she was already speaking quietly with Dominic. After a moment, she approached us. I will come with you, she announced, leaving no room for argument. The nice man will drive us. The nice man looked about as nice as a loaded gun, but I was too worried about Emma to care. We piled into the SUV, and Dominic navigated through the night streets toward St. Vincent's gleaming towers. How did you arrange this? I asked Mrs. Patel quietly, as Emma dozed fitfully against my chest. The older woman's expression was knowing. I did nothing. When I called the doctor, he was already aware of Emma's case, said a specialist was waiting at St. Vincent's. Antonio's reach was more extensive than I'd imagined. The thought should have frightened me, but with my daughter burning with fever in my arms, I could only feel grateful. At the hospital, we were whisked past the crowded waiting room directly to a private examination room. A pediatrician appeared almost immediately, a distinguished woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. I'm Dr. Reeves, she introduced herself, already examining Emma with gentle efficiency. I understand Emma has had recurrent fevers and infections? Yes, I confirmed, watching anxiously as she checked my daughter's vital signs. For months now. Our apartment has some mold issues, but I can't afford to move. Dr. Reeves nodded, making notes on her tablet. I'd like to run some tests, blood work, chest x-ray, perhaps a CT scan. Fear clutched at my chest, not just for Emma's health, but for the astronomical bill these procedures would generate. I don't have insurance that would cover. All expenses are covered, Dr. Reeves interrupted smoothly. You've been sponsored by the St. Vincent's Foundation, the private foundation that funded care for underprivileged children. Another of Antonio's arrangements, no doubt. Hours passed in a haze of tests, consultations, and hushed conversations with specialists. Mrs. Patel remained steadfastly at my side, her gnarled hand occasionally squeezing mine in silent support. Dominic stationed himself outside Emma's room like a sentinel, speaking quietly into his phone at regular intervals. Near midnight, Dr. Reeves returned with a definitive diagnosis, a rare form of pneumonia, complicated by Emma's compromised immune system from the chronic mold exposure. The treatment would be aggressive, IV antibiotics, respiratory therapy, possibly a hospital stay of several days. She'll make a full recovery, Dr. Reeves assured me, as I wiped tears of relief from my eyes. Though I strongly recommend finding new housing as soon as possible. The mold in your current residence will only cause recurrence. I nodded numbly, stroking Emma's hair as she slept, finally comfortable with medication flowing through her small veins. New housing. The apartment above the boutique in Brightwater, with its clean air and proximity to good schools, rose in my mind's eye. Mrs. Patel touched my shoulder gently. I will stay with Emma if you need to make arrangements. I looked up to find Dominic standing in the doorway, his usually impassive face showing a hint of sympathy. Mr. Vicario would like to speak with you, he said quietly. He's downstairs. My exhaustion and worry crystallized into sudden clarity. I'd been naive to think I had a choice. Antonio Vicario had orchestrated this entire scenario, not causing Emma's illness, of course, but capitalizing on it to demonstrate exactly what he could offer, and what I stood to lose. I'll be right back, I told Mrs. Patel, kissing Emma's forehead before following Dominic to the elevator. Antonio waited in a private consultation room off the main lobby, still in his casual attire from earlier. He stood as I entered, his dark eyes assessing my disheveled appearance. How is she? He asked without preamble. Resting comfortably, I replied, suddenly aware of the silk dress I still wore, now rumpled from hours of holding Emma. The doctors say she'll recover fully. Relief flickered across his face, genuine concern that momentarily caught me off guard. Good. I've arranged for the best care. Dr. Reeves is the top pediatric pulmonologist in the Northeast. Why? I asked directly, too exhausted for games. Why are you doing all this? Antonio was silent for a long moment, studying me with those impenetrable dark eyes. 6 years ago, he finally said, I found a young woman eating scraps in the kitchen of one of my restaurants. I stared at him, uncomprehending. Her name was Sophia, he continued. She was pregnant, desperate, trying to save enough money to escape an abusive boyfriend. I offered her help, She refused, too proud or too frightened to accept. A chill ran through me as I began to understand. 3 weeks later, she was found beaten to death in an alley. Antonio's voice remained steady, but something dark and painful flickered behind his eyes. Her unborn child died with her. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I could have prevented it," he said flatly. "I recognized her desperation, but I didn't insist. I respected her refusal and walked away." The parallel was unmistakable. "I'm not Sophia." "No," he agreed, "but you're in the same desperate situation. The difference is, I won't walk away this time." We stood in silence, the weight of his words hanging between us. Outside the consultation room, the hospital hummed with activity. Doctors and nurses working to heal, to save, to comfort. "The boutique position," I finally said. "It's still available?" Antonio nodded once. "And Emma would have proper medical care? Good schools? The best of everything," he confirmed. "You both would." I took a deep breath. I don't want to be involved in anything illegal. "The packages," Antonio clarified. "Non-negotiable, I'm afraid. What's in them?" "Better you don't know the specifics," he replied. "But I give you my word. Nothing harmful. Nothing that would endanger children." His word. The promise of a criminal, a man who operated outside the law. And yet, as I thought of Emma upstairs, finally receiving the care she desperately needed, I found myself inclined to believe him. "I need time to think," I said. Antonio reached into his pocket and withdrew a key on a simple silver ring. "The apartment above the boutique," he explained, placing it on the table between us. "Take Emma there when she's released. See if it suits you both. The position remains open until you decide." I stared at the key, understanding the crossroads it represented. "And if I ultimately say no, then you leave the key with the property manager and return to your life." Antonio buttoned his suit jacket, preparing to leave. "But I don't think you will." He was right, of course. We both knew it. With Emma's health at stake, with the opportunity to give her everything I'd ever dreamed of, my decision was already made. I picked up the key. 1 month later, I stood in the boutique's front window, arranging a display of handcrafted wooden toys. Sunlight streamed through the glass, catching on the polished surfaces of rocking horses and miniature carousels. Outside on Brightwater's main street, women in designer clothing pushed expensive strollers past artisanal bakeries and exclusive galleries. "Perfect," came a voice from behind me. I turned to find Elise, my assistant manager, admiring my handiwork. A former buyer for a luxury department store, she'd appeared the day after I accepted the position, claiming Antonio had personally recommended her. Like everyone else in my new life, she asked no questions about my sudden career change. "The new shipment of French linen rompers arrived," she continued. "They're even more beautiful than the catalog showed." I nodded, still adjusting to the vocabulary of my new world, where children's clothing cost more than my previous monthly rent. "Set them out in the east display near the cashmere blankets." "Yes, Ms. Morgan." Elise disappeared into the stockroom with practiced efficiency. Ms. Morgan. Not Lily anymore. The transition had been seamless, orchestrated with Antonio's characteristic thoroughness. My resignation from Bella Luna, our move to the spacious apartment upstairs, Emma's enrollment in Brightwater Academy's prestigious preschool program, all arranged before I'd even agreed to take the position. The boutique, named Piccolo, in elegant script above the door, had opened 2 weeks ago to immediate success among Brightwater's elite. The merchandise was exquisite, ethically sourced from artisans across Europe and Asia. Nothing about the shop hinted at its secondary purpose. The first special delivery had arrived 3 days ago, a nondescript brown package among our regular shipments. Following Antonio's instructions, I'd placed it in the climate-controlled storage room in the basement and sent a text to the number he'd provided. Within an hour, Dominic had appeared to retrieve it, nodding approvingly at my discretion. I hadn't asked what was inside. The less I knew, the safer Emma would be. The bell above the door chimed, and I turned with my practiced customer smile, freezing when I recognized the visitor. "Mr. Vicario," I said, my formal tone at odds with the sudden acceleration of my pulse. Antonio closed the door behind him, glancing around the boutique with assessing eyes. He looked impeccable as always in a tailored navy suit, his wedding band catching the light as he adjusted his cuffs. In the month since our agreement, I'd seen him only twice, brief visits to check on the boutique's progress. "Ms. Morgan," he replied, matching my formality. "The shop looks excellent. You've done well." "Thank you." I gestured toward the back. "Would you like to speak privately?" He nodded, following me to the small office behind the register area. Once the door closed behind us, his posture relaxed marginally. "How is Emma adjusting to her new school?" he asked, surprising me with the personal question. "Very well," I answered, unable to suppress a small smile. "Her teacher says she's advanced for her age." Antonio nodded, unsurprised. "And her health?" "Completely recovered. No fevers since we moved. Good." He moved to the window overlooking the shop floor, where Elise was helping an elegant customer examine baby shoes that cost more than I used to make in a week. "And how are you finding Brightwater?" The question carried weight beyond simple small talk. Was I comfortable in this world of wealth and privilege? Was I maintaining the necessary appearance of legitimacy? "It's different," I admitted, "but we're adapting." Antonio turned back to me, his dark eyes intent. "Your neighbors believe you're a widow. Emma's father lost to a tragic accident overseas. The boutique was purchased with his life insurance. Remember these details if questioned." I nodded. The cover story had been carefully constructed, with documentation to support it if anyone dug deeper. "There will be another delivery tomorrow," he continued, voice lower. "Larger than the last. Dominic will come after closing to collect it." "I understand." Antonio studied me for a moment. "You're uncomfortable with this arrangement?" It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I'm grateful for everything you've done for Emma," I said carefully. "But yes, I worry about the risks." "There are no risks if you follow the protocol exactly," he replied. "No one suspects a children's boutique in Brightwater." "And your wife?" I asked suddenly. "Does she suspect anything?" The question crossed a boundary I'd carefully maintained. Antonio's personal life remained a mystery. I knew he was married, but nothing more. The elegant woman occasionally photographed at his side at charity events existed in a separate universe from our arrangement. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at my boldness. "My wife understands my business requires discretion. Does she know about me?" I pressed, uncertain why it mattered. "She knows I've opened a boutique in Brightwater," he replied evenly. "The rest is not her concern." The distance in his tone reminded me of our respective positions. Whatever personal interest Antonio had shown in my welfare, I was ultimately an employee, a useful asset in his complex business empire. "I should return to the floor," I said, stepping toward the door. Antonio moved faster, his hand on the doorknob before I could reach it. We stood close, too close, in the small office. "There's another matter," he said, voice low. "Emma's father." I stiffened. "What about him?" "Jason Reynolds was released from prison last week. Drug charges. His third offense." The blood drained from my face. "How did you—" "I told you, Lily. I investigate thoroughly." Antonio's expression hardened. "He's made inquiries about your whereabouts." Fear, cold and familiar, slithered down my spine. "The restraining order is worth less than the paper it's printed on," Antonio interrupted. "Men like Reynolds don't respect legal boundaries." The walls seemed to close in around me. After everything, the new start, the safe home, Emma's recovery, the past was reaching out with grasping fingers to drag us back. "What do I do?" I whispered. Antonio's gaze was steady. "Nothing. It's being handled." The implication sent a chill through me. "What does that mean?" "It means you and Emma are under my protection." His voice was soft but carried unmistakable steel. "No one will harm what belongs to me." What belongs to me? The words should have offended me, but instead, they offered a strange comfort. In Antonio's world, possession meant protection, a shield against threats like Jason. "Thank you," I said simply. Antonio nodded once, then opened the door. The conversation was over. As he moved through the boutique toward the exit, customers instinctively stepped aside, sensing his authority without understanding its source. At the door, he paused, turning back to where I stood. "There's a charity gala at the Brightwater Country Club this Saturday," he said, voice pitched for my ears alone. Wear something appropriate. Dominic will pick you up at 7, not an invitation. An instruction. I don't have a babysitter for Emma, I began. Mrs. Patel has agreed to stay overnight, he replied, anticipating my concern as usual. It's important that you begin establishing yourself in Brightwater society. Before I could respond, he was gone, the bell chiming softly in his wake. That night, after tucking Emma into her new canopy bed in a room filled with more toys than she'd ever imagined, I stood at the apartment window, looking out over Brightwater's manicured streets. Lights glowed in elegant homes, and expensive cars gleamed in circular driveways. My new world, purchased with a Faustian bargain I was still coming to terms with. My phone chimed with a text from an unmarked number I'd come to recognize as Antonio's private line. Package delivered to your door for Saturday. Outside my apartment, a white box waited, another designer dress no doubt. Another piece in the elaborate facade Antonio was constructing around me. As I lifted the box, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the hallway mirror. A woman I barely recognized in expensive clothing, with manicured nails and professionally styled hair. The frightened waitress scraping by on leftovers seemed like a character from someone else's story. Inside the apartment, Emma slept peacefully, her breathing strong and even, her small body no longer racked by fevers and coughs. For her transformation alone, I would have made this deal 1,000 times over. I opened the box to find a gown of midnight blue, more elegant than anything I'd ever worn. Beneath it lay a velvet jewel case containing a diamond pendant on a delicate platinum chain. No note, no explanation needed. Just another reminder of the gilded cage I'd willingly entered and the man who held the key. The Brightwater Country Club blazed with light as Dominic guided the car through wrought iron gates. Sprawling gardens and a championship golf course surrounded the colonial-style clubhouse, where valets in crisp uniforms assisted guests from luxury vehicles. Mr. Vicario is already inside, Dominic informed me as he opened my door. Main ballroom. I nodded, smoothing the midnight blue silk of my gown. The diamond pendant rested cool against my collarbone, catching the light with each breath. Around me, Brightwater's elite arrived in designer finery, exchanging air kisses and practiced laughter. At the entrance, a tuxedoed attendant checked a tablet. Name, please? Lily Morgan, I said, half expecting to be turned away. His expression warmed immediately. Ms. Morgan, welcome. Mr. Vicario mentioned you would be joining us tonight. Of course he had. In Antonio's world, doors opened, obstacles disappeared, and everyone remembered your name, if he wanted them to. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and floral arrangements taller than Emma. A string quartet played near a polished dance floor, while waitstaff circulated with champagne and canapes. I accepted a glass, sipping slowly as I scanned the crowd. Lily Morgan? A woman's voice interrupted my search. I turned to find an elegant blonde in her 40s, her smile professionally warm. Yes? Margaret Ashford, Brightwater Women's League. She extended a manicured hand. Antonio mentioned you'd recently joined our community. The boutique on Main Street is yours, isn't it? Antonio again, paving my way. Yes, Piccolo. We've been open just a few weeks. Charming place. I purchased the sweetest little cashmere set for my niece. Margaret linked her arm through mine with practiced familiarity. Come, let me introduce you to some people you simply must know. For the next hour, I was guided through a carefully choreographed social dance. The president of the preschool board, the pediatrician whose practice only accepted referrals, the realtor who handled Brightwater's most exclusive properties. Everyone welcomed me with the same polite interest, all mentioning Antonio's name as a kind of password that granted immediate acceptance. I was being established, legitimized. Another aspect of Antonio's meticulous planning. There you are. The low voice behind me sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. I turned to find Antonio watching me, something like approval in his dark gaze as he took in my appearance. You've been busy, I said quietly, nodding toward Margaret Ashford, who had discreetly withdrawn at his approach. Merely ensuring you have the right connections. He offered his arm. Walk with me. We moved through the crowd, which parted subtly before him. Antonio acknowledged greetings with minimal nods, his attention seemingly focused entirely on me. You're doing well, he said as we reached the terrace doors. They're accepting you. Because you told them to. I replied. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I merely made introductions. Your own charm did the rest. Outside on the terrace, the night air carried the scent of late summer roses. Below us, garden lights illuminated stone pathways winding through manicured lawns. We stood in comfortable silence, a respectable distance apart. Jason Reynolds has left the state, Antonio said abruptly. I turned to him sharply. What did you do? Nothing permanent, he assured me, though the cold edge in his voice suggested he'd considered it. He was simply encouraged to pursue opportunities elsewhere, with the understanding that returning would have consequences. Relief and unease battled within me. Thank you. Antonio nodded once, accepting my gratitude as his due. Emma is safe now. You both are. As long as I continue our arrangement, I added quietly. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Is that how you see it? A transaction? Isn't it? Perhaps initially, he conceded. But things change, Lily. Before I could ask what he meant, a woman's voice interrupted us. Antonio, darling, I've been looking everywhere for you. I turned to find a striking woman approaching. Tall and elegant in a designer gown, dark hair swept into a perfect chignon. Diamonds glittered at her ears and throat, far more elaborate than my simple pendant. Antonio's wife. It could be no one else. Vanessa, Antonio acknowledged, his expression cooling perceptibly. I didn't expect you tonight, clearly. Her smile was brittle as her gaze swept over me, assessing and dismissing in a single glance. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? Lily Morgan, Antonio said, his tone revealing nothing. She owns Piccolo, the new children's boutique in town. Lily, my wife, Vanessa. I extended my hand, determined to maintain composure. A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Vicario. Vanessa's grip was fleeting, her smile never reaching her eyes. How lovely. Antonio has always had an interest in supporting local businesses. The implication was clear. I wasn't the first local business Antonio had taken under his wing. The boutique is doing quite well, I replied evenly. Your husband has been very helpful with introductions. I'm sure he has. Vanessa placed a possessive hand on Antonio's arm. Darling, the Hendersons are asking for you. Something about the hospital fundraiser. Antonio's expression remained impassive, but I sensed his irritation. Give them my regards. I'll speak with them later. Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly, but she maintained her social smile. Don't be too long. People are noticing your absence. With a final dismissive glance at me, she glided back toward the ballroom. I should go, I said quietly. This was a mistake. Antonio's hand closed around my wrist, gentle but firm. Stay, your wife is well compensated for her discretion and social duties, he interrupted. Our marriage is a business arrangement, nothing more. The blunt statement shocked me. Then why remain married? Appearances, stability, convenience. He released my wrist slowly. In my position, certain traditions are expected. I stepped back, suddenly feeling the full weight of our different worlds. I should check on Emma. Mrs. Patel would have called if there were any concerns. Antonio studied my face. You're uncomfortable. Why? Because I don't belong here, I admitted. This life, it's not real for me. It could be, he said simply. The implication hung between us, unspoken but clear. More than a business arrangement, more than protection. Something I hadn't allowed myself to consider. I can't, I whispered. Can't or won't? His dark eyes held mine. You've accepted everything else I've offered. For Emma, I clarified. Everything has been for her. And nothing for yourself? Antonio stepped closer, his voice low. You deserve happiness too, Lily. Not like this. I gestured vaguely toward the ballroom where his wife circulated among guests. I won't be your mistress, Antonio. I won't be kept. Something like respect flickered in his expression. That was never my intention. Then what is this? I demanded quietly. What am I to you? Antonio was silent for a long moment, his gaze searching my face. A possibility, he finally said. Something I haven't allowed myself in a very long time. Before I could respond, a commotion from inside the ballroom caught our attention. Raised voices, the sound of breaking glass. Antonio tensed, instantly alert. Dominic appeared at the terrace doors, his expression grim. "Boss, we have a situation." Antonio's demeanor changed instantly, all traces of warmth vanishing. "Take Ms. Morgan home," he ordered. "Now." "What's happening?" I asked, suddenly afraid. "Nothing that concerns you," Antonio replied, already moving toward the doors. "Go home to Emma." Dominic's hand on my elbow was gentle but insistent as he guided me through a side exit, bypassing the growing chaos in the ballroom. Through the windows, I glimpsed men in dark suits converging, guests backing away in confusion. "What's going on?" I asked again, as Dominic hurried me toward the waiting car. "Federal agents," he replied tersely. Someone talked. My blood ran cold. "The boutique is clean," Dominic assured me as he opened the car door. "All packages have been moved. There's nothing to connect you." As we drove away from the country club, I watched red and blue lights approaching in the distance. A raid. Antonio was being arrested, or worse. "Will he be okay?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. Dominic's eyes met mine briefly in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Vicario has contingency plans for everything." At home, I found Emma sleeping peacefully, Mrs. Patel dozing in a chair beside her bed. I thanked the older woman and sent her home, then changed out of my gown, carefully placing the diamond pendant in its velvet box, the trappings of a life that had never truly been mine. For 3 days, I heard nothing. The boutique remained open, customers unaware of any disruption. Elise managed the floor while I worked in the office, jumping at every sound, expecting federal agents or worse. On the 4th morning, a plain envelope was delivered to the boutique. Inside, a single key and an address in the mountains, 3 hours north. A safe house, I realized, an escape route if needed. That night, as Emma slept, a soft knock came at our apartment door. I opened it to find Antonio, his usual immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, a faint bruise shadowing his jawline. "You're okay," I breathed, relief washing through me. "More or less," he replied, stepping inside when I moved back. "The federal investigation has been redirected. You're safe." "At what cost?" I asked, noticing the weariness in his eyes. Antonio shrugged slightly. "The cost of doing business." We stood in silence, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between us. "I meant what I said at the gala," he finally offered. "About possibilities." I studied his face, the face of a criminal, a protector, a man who had changed my life irrevocably. "What are you offering, Antonio?" "Really? A choice," he said simply. "Stay in my world with all its complications. Or take Emma and start fresh somewhere else." He gestured toward the envelope on the counter. "The mountain house is yours either way, fully paid for, in your name only." An exit. A real choice. The one thing I hadn't expected from him. "Why?" I whispered. Antonio's dark eyes held mine. "Because you were right. You deserve more than to be kept." In that moment, I made my decision. Not for Emma this time, but for